Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about building a house in midlife. I think many women fantasize about doing this. Join us as we learn about layout, design choices, and the long process from plans on paper to walking through the front door. Let's get started. Listeners, today we're talking about building a home in midlife. And we've talked about moving earlier this year, but moving into an existing home is completely different than starting from scratch on a build. And to help us explore this topic, we have a guest today. Our friend Tiana Blaisdell has joined us before. We've talked to Tiana about teen dating, and then we've talked about decorating your home. And now we're going to talk about building a home in midlife. And Mindy, I know that you love it when Tiana joins us, and I do too. And I just think this is going to be such a fun conversation.
Yes, I'm going to try really hard to stay on topic because there's a million things I would love to ask Tiana. So I'm just going to have to refrain. But super excited about our topic today.
Yes. And Tiana, welcome to Midlife Matters.
Yay. I'm so glad to be here. It's so fun.
Yes. And so Tiana, I know that people have heard from you before, but I imagine we have some newer listeners. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I'm Tiana, and I live in Tampa, Florida. I've been married for 23 years, and we are actually involved in camp ministry. So we spend our summers in upstate New York and the rest of the year here in Tampa. And we have 4 daughters, all about a year apart, and all currently in college. 2 of them are in Mississippi with 2 of Marie's children at the same college. So that's super fun. And we have our first wedding coming up. So that's also super fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
Yes. During the course of Midlife Matters, we've had you on to talk about teen dating, and the guinea pig for teen dating is now going to be getting married.
Yes, I was thinking about that. I think the last time when we talked about that, I think she's my oldest, and I think she had her first boyfriend. So this is, here we are. Now we have the first wedding.
Yes, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, Tiana, you and I were texting back and forth because you were asking me some questions about the house I moved into. Mm-hmm. And you were asking because you are custom building a new house. And I just thought, oh my goodness, we have to have her on because that topic, there's so much to explore. And so you are in the very unique position of building a new house just as you're entering a new phase of life. Like listeners, her youngest just started their freshman year in college. So this is a whole new phase of life. And I think this is so exciting to watch because myself personally would kind of be overwhelmed by the decisions that you have to make, but I'm so interested in how someone else makes the decisions. So Tiana, I want you to start right at the beginning. Tell us how you got to this point, what your concept and goals for this house are, compare it with your other ones. We're all in for whatever you want to tell us.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, so the last time we talked about design stuff, I had recently built a new house and we loved that house. We loved the neighborhood and we're super content, but our HOA got a little wonky there at the end. We have typically really enjoyed living in neighborhoods with HOAs, especially in Florida when your homes are so close together. I don't want someone painting their house purple across the street from me. So we've always embraced the HOA and we've never had any problems with them. But ours got a little crazy and started restricting the amount of gatherings you could have. So we were not allowed to have more than 4 gatherings a year, and we were going to need to get a permit for those gatherings, which resulted in sort of a mass exodus from the neighborhood. Not to overly spiritualize it, but I mean, we as believers, we like to gather in our home a lot. And also, too, my mother lived in the same neighborhood. She built right after we did. She also gathers a lot and has lots of Bible studies and little groups, and, our house is always full of college students and stuff. So that's just was not going to work for us. And so even though we were really content in our home, we kind of had to make a very quick decision when the market was really hot. Spring before last, it was really hot. And so we just decided to strike when the iron was hot and go ahead and get out while we could. Also knowing that news about neighborhoods like that kind of start getting around. And so then it becomes harder to sell your house. So anyways, we were not planning on doing this in any way, shape, or form. we did it. And then we didn't want to jump into another HOA, kind of like a little bit gun shy there. And so we started looking for property really briefly and just happened upon a really pretty 3.5 acres that we loved. And so that just kind of like solidified it for us. And then, like I said, my mom was in the neighborhood and we had always talked about building together someday, someday. But that ended up being now. So yeah, so basically we both decided to just move into apartments and get the process started. And that's where it all started. So basically we went from a home that we really loved, with so many things that we loved about it, to kind of starting from scratch. And so the fun part was I was able to incorporate all the things that I really loved about that home and maybe tweak a few of the things that I didn't love so much about it. So
you knew that you were about to enter empty nest. You said that you decided to sell and move into an apartment when your youngest was entering her senior year of high school. And so at that point, how do you decide on a layout? How do you decide how big the house is going to be? How many bedrooms you're going to have, bathrooms? I mean, you're changing seasons, priorities for the new house, things like that. Talk to us about that.
Originally, I had this inspiration for our home before, which was really steeped in like the history of Tampa and South Florida and Cuban stuff. So I was like still in this mode, like I wasn't finished with my house before. Basically, the inspiration stayed the same, but like you said, I'm entering this new stage. So like some of our needs changed a little bit. And also the location was really different because now we're going to be in this rural area, which I am not a country girl, in case you didn't know. In the summers, we live on 500 acres in the middle of nowhere, New York, and that is just enough country life for me normally.
Right.
So anyways, the setting is different. The stage of life is different. I've always been inspired by mid-century Cuba, which is such a strange inspiration. But for you history buffs, Cuba was sort of like stuck in time, or people say that Cuba has been stuck in time in lots of ways, but specifically in like the arts and architecture, things like that. Basically, after the revolution, like there was all this crazy design happening down there and all this exciting stuff happening. And after the revolution, like 2/3 of their architects left Cuba. The art schools all shut down, and it's basically created this little juxtaposition of this place where you have all this like neoclassical architecture but then like mid-century and Art Deco stuff all kind of happening at the same time. And it's just sort of been stuck there since the 50s and 60s. And so when I go to downtown Tampa or even in South Florida, you see a lot of that inspiration there. And so again, that kind of stayed the same, only the house now is in the middle of the country. And so basically I've been inspired by going more rural or more like earthy with design and stuff like that, but still kind of similar inspiration. Well, then when I started looking at the layout, again, I really loved the original floor plan that we were working with from our last house, even though I didn't design it. That was a tract home build. There were so many things I loved about it. And some things haven't changed. Like we always were very into entertaining, and that doesn't change, right? Like we only want to entertain more in this stage. So I'm still wanting that like semi-open floor plan, multiple living areas, multiple eating areas, multiple places for people to sit, thinking about where people are going to sit. Which is all stuff I think we talked about on our last time we were together. But the sleeping component is what is different, obviously. Okay. And, I have 4 kids that as of now, nobody's living full time in Tampa. I mean, I have one at home right now just till she gets married. And then he's in the Army, so they're going to be living wherever. So I just expect to have a lot of out of town guests. But like, I didn't want to allocate a lot of the entertaining space to living space when we're not going to be using that on a daily basis. Like, I think, Marie, you and I were talking about that before with your kids coming home. It's hard because it's like on the daily, you're not going to be using it. But when you have an out of town guest, you really need it. So by the time I kind of went ahead and changed some of the things that I didn't like about our old floor plan, like the powder room that at the time was right next to the dining room, and in the middle
Why
of
did
both
they do
living. It
that?
was
Yeah, why did
literally
they
in the
do that?
middle, in the middle of the house. And it was always awkward because like, you know, it was right there. So a guest who didn't know you well wouldn't be like, hey, you know, where is your powder room? To where then I could say, hey, you could use my bathroom if you would prefer in my bedroom or down the hall bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always so awkward. Whereas my friends would come over and be like, I'm not using that bathroom. Where is your bathroom? You know?
Right.
So there's some things like that, like I didn't have a pantry before, some little things that I got to change. Well, then by the time I allocated enough like entertaining space, I didn't have a lot of square footage left.
Okay.
So I didn't want like to do a ton of like living area, but I ended up taking the square footage that I had before of 3 kind of bigger size bedrooms. And I was like, well, if I made 4, how small would those rooms be?
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up being 10 by 10. So I have 4 10 by 10 guest rooms that I'm going to set up more like a hotel room suite, almost like very minimal, not true closets, you know, more of like wardrobe situations and stuff like that. So I was able to kind of keep the square footage where I wanted it, but still have 4 guest rooms that can accommodate like a queen bed, basically. So
yeah. And you're not encouraging people to just stay forever.
Well, no, that's what we kept saying. That's what when we were working with the architect, we're like, we don't want to make them too comfortable here. So you know. Right. Which honestly, they'll all be sharing one bathroom. So, you know, I don't know how long they'll want to stay, but I will say we did decide in lieu of a second bathroom for this. It's like a guest suite hallway. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's like a separate little portion of the house. Well, I could have put 2 bathrooms in there, but I decided to keep one. And then the space across the hall, I'm doing a big like communal like linen and supply closet for all the guests for those 4 guest rooms. So like all the, you know, shampoos and body washes and towels and extra pillows and pack and play, all that stuff will be stored in there, and it'll be like for all of those people to use, not just like personally.
You are doing this with your mom this time. So can you kind of explain that situation?
Yes. So as I was working with an architect, I had to kind of keep reminding him that my mother was not this old, decrepit woman. She is still very much, first of all, working more than full time and hosting at her house a lot and has out-of-town guests and all the things. So that was different because I'm not just building, you know, a little room with a kitchenette. Like she needed her whole space. So we essentially, her wing has its own garage entry, her own front door entry, her own back porch that faces a completely different direction than our house. Like it's very, very separate. So she'll have 2 bedrooms and a full kitchen, dining area, you know, the whole thing. And then what we did was that guest area that I was just telling you about, this guest hallway. It's basically a guest hallway with 4 mirroring rooms. And I did a door on either end that locks. So basically, if she has out-of-town guests and she would like to access the guest rooms, then we'll lock mine and vice versa. So we're kind of able to share those guest rooms. And then that way I didn't have to build like quite as much square footage for her.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So she's got her own little, I mean, it's almost more like a duplex. We looked the route of, I'm not sure if technically it's considered an ADU or not. I don't think it actually is. An ADU has, like, you're not, depending on the county that you live in, the restrictions are all very different. So if you're thinking about doing this with your parents, before you buy a piece of land, you need to research the different requirements, the different restrictions for ADUs, which is an accessory dwelling unit. So like some of them can't have a stove. Everything else can be exactly like a normal house, but it can't have a stove or things like that. Ours was, you could build a separate building, but it had to be like connected to the main house by at least like, I think it was like a 20-foot walkway or a covering or a garage. It's just, there's all these little rules and it can vary. I mean, we are right where we are. We have 3 different counties and the rules are different for all 3 counties, right over like 5 miles down the road. So you just have to look into that. But we, at the end of the day, decided it was more affordable and made more sense to go ahead and attach her to our house. So I'm pretty sure we don't fall into the category as an ADU now.
Okay.
So she's a full kitchen and all of that. But yeah, I think key for her was that she has her own entrance, her own separate, like we don't have to interact if we don't want to. So, but we can when we want to. So
yeah, that's awesome, Tiana. I mean, what a great situation for you and for your mom. I mean, it's just awesome.
Well, and she doesn't want to admit that, eventually she probably will need some help, but honestly, I feel like as someone who's always been super independent, I think this will be good because, we'll be there when she needs help, but we won't have to really make any big decisions on her behalf.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's wonderful. All right. So you come up with the plans for your house, and it sounds like that's a huge hurdle. Once you have your actual plans, we wanted to kind of talk with you a little bit about how do you pick what you're going to have in the house. So like, what are the first choices that you have to make?
Okay. Before I answer that though, I forgot to mention, if you, like you, Mindy, if you are, considering doing a custom built house, it is much more affordable and much easier if you can choose a floor plan that already exists. So whether that's through the builder, our builder offered a lot of really great floor plans, and, you can buy some online, and even that is much cheaper than working with an architect. And they can even still move some walls and do some different things. However, for us, doing it with my mom and what she needed, there just wasn't anything out there. And so that put us in a custom home situation anyway. So at that point, you may as well build what you want and get what you need, So that's why we ended up going that route. But you will save a lot of money and time if you can pick a floor plan that already exists. So that was just something
Tiana, as you described your home with your future kids, adult children, your mom, I feel like the listeners and myself already want to buy the floor plans that you have done because it sounds so well thought out,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I've already noticed some design flaws. So I'm going to ignore them.
There always will be. They say, even if you've written a book or anything, it's like, oh, well, now I would change this. But
someday someone's going to live in the house and they're going to be like, I don't know why they put this window right here. And I'm going to be like, I know. I'm going to say it from the grave. I know I did it. I made a mistake. But I'm sorry. Okay. So you were saying what was the first thing
that you have to decide on.
Do? So actually, this was kind of surprising to me, to be honest with you. The first thing they asked for, and it's very quickly in the process, this was back in June, is cabinets, countertops, flooring, and wall tile, which I just didn't realize that would be so quickly. So those were the first decisions they asked for. My strategy was to go with the more limiting choices. And what I cared about the most. So I decided that what I cared about the most was my countertops and my floors. And I knew that those were going to be a little more of a narrow thing to find, number one. And also budget-wise would kind of set the tone for the rest of the things. I ended up really starting with countertops. I knew that I was wanting this build to be very earthy. And I'm really inspired right now by more natural materials. So I knew I was looking for a natural stone. And because of that, you're going to only find what you find. So you kind of got to fall in love with something and then get it. And so that's what we ended up starting with. I ended up finding, for those of you who are doing your kitchens, some really beautiful honed and leathered granites, actually. And they were level A granites. One of them in particular is really beautiful and super awesome. I couldn't believe that was granite and that it was also level A. So I say that to say, granite is sort of faux pas right now. Everybody's trying to get rid of their granite, but just know there are some granites that are really cool and up and coming. And I've actually seen them on a lot of design websites and accounts right now. So definitely don't count out granite. And then I knew I wanted some honed Calcutta marble. So I used that as some kind of accents. So it made the budget work to do a really affordable granite married with a little bit of marble. I went ahead and nailed down my flooring and made sure those worked. And then I knew that cabinets and wall tile are kind of lots of different options at that point. So that's kind of the order that I decided to do things in.
Well, when you have a lot of options, how did you pick your cabinets then? Because I could never pick from a ton of options. How do people do it?
I know. It is hard. I say a ton of options. Yes, a ton of options. But at the same time, keeping the budget in mind, that can help some. And deciding like where you want to splurge, which is versus where you want to save. So I knew for me, cabinets was one of those things where I didn't want to upgrade my cabinets a lot. I didn't want to do a lot of fancy things, but I just wanted a lot of cabinets everywhere. We decided not to do, this is very controversial, but we decided to go more the European route. And so we have no bedroom closets in the whole house.
Oh, this is interesting. Explain.
So
European and Cuban married together.
Yeah, I know. Listen, you don't want to live in my brain, Mindy.
I love
but
tell us.
But yeah, I've had walk-in closets. We've lived in so many houses over the years. I've had so many different kinds of closets. So I really have tended to like more shallow organization space, like linear and shallow, as opposed to me walking in the room. Really, if you look at the amount of organizational space you have in some walk-in closets, I'm not going to say all because some of them are like a small house, but in a lot of them that I've had, it's like if you were to just lay it out as one linear thing, it's actually not as much storage as you think it is by the time you have dead corners in your little walk-in and you have to stand in the middle of it. So it's not as much space as you think. And so, yeah, I just decided to do basically built-in cabinetry for like floor to ceiling for our bedrooms. And then I'm going to figure something out for the guest rooms.
That is
later,
so
but I'm
cool.
kind of going to figure that out. I'm going to DIY those, I think.
Yes.
So.
Now, I don't follow a lot of European architecture. So is that what they do a lot over there? Instead of closets, they do cabinetry?
Well, I say Europe, but quite honestly, in like most parts of the world.
Oh, okay.
Like I think we're one of the few that really do true, built-in closets. I watch a lot of House Hunters International. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay. So that's so interesting.
If you watch that, you'll see, like in the Caribbean or South America or overseas, like so many don't have walk-in or like our type of closet.
Right.
Perfect. Right. Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. How did you decide on cabinets? Do you go with painted cabinets, wood cabinets? How do you decide on a tone?
Right. So once I figured out what the more cheaper options were, like I said, I've just been really wanting to go more earthy with everything. And so I was really liking the things where you could really see the wood coming through. So more of like a stained wood, like even so, and I'm marrying the sleek mid-century Art Deco style of things with more traditional lines as well. And so I have a lot of flat front, or really what's called slab front cabinetry that's black stained oak. So it's very like modern looking, but it still has an earthy vibe. But I'm marrying that with a more like shaker wood stained, typical traditional looking cabinet door. So there's kind of both in both areas. And then my mother really wanted white or cream cabinetry. And so I am incorporating cream as well. So it's kind of like the three working together. I don't know.
Can't wait to see pictures of that, Tiana. I really can't. I think
gotta tell you though, white kitchens are like, they're going out now. So, my last kitchen wasn't white, but what's interesting is just trying to figure out like what's coming next, really. And so what's next is what a lot of us are getting rid of right now is actually what's coming up next, which is a more medium stained brown cabinet. So for those of you that have that, don't get rid of it just yet.
I actually love that the medium warmth is coming back into homes. That makes me so happy.
Yes. And chocolate, like dark chocolate stained wood also. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good to know, because I never updated from when that was in style a long time. So I'm back in style, y'all.
That's exactly right. Don't do anything. Don't do anything. You're going to be good.
Tiana, I actually find you to be a very talented designer in so many different areas of your life. So with your design background, your style, your influences, the things that you're passionate about and that bring you joy, how in the world did you go about even organizing your thoughts or choosing what to prioritize? I can hear you saying sometimes it was cost. You started with that, or you picked kind of what the pieces that meant the most. And then, you put those in first and then you added. So can you tell us how you organized even your own thoughts and your design and everything?
I'm a big believer in two things. Number one, having a clear, or at least semi-clear direction or inspiration, at least. I wouldn't say direction as much as I would say inspiration. So when I might be feeling off course, I'm constantly asking myself, okay, how does this go back to your original inspiration and does it fit? And then also at the same time, though, letting your home kind of evolve, letting the project evolve to what it's going to be, because it almost never is going to be exactly what you had in your mind, because like you said, there's going to be constraints there. You have these grand visions of these iron glass doors everywhere with lots of window panes and lights on them. But, finances are going to say that's not an option. So you might have to pivot and do something that's more of a traditional French door that's more cheaper or whatever. There's a million things like that where, but at the end of the day, usually those things make for little happy moments or just more interesting things. Like I have this one area of the floor plan that's a little bit wonky, or was seemingly wonky, off of my dining room, where it's kind of in between the two houses, for lack of better terms. But it's ending up being my most favorite part, because I'm going to do like a courtyard, and I have all these ideas, and I'm doing windows above glass doors that it's just going to be a really cool moment, And so there's things that eventually, or just evolve over time to where, it just kind of is what it was always meant to be. Not to like make it emotional or whatever, but I think that most projects are like that, where, you have a plan, but you kind of have to let it make its own course too. So,
well, Tiana, like you've talked about, you have great inspiration, but it just, I think like to the average person, I look at all the different choices and I think, okay, is this something that's going to last just till next year? Is this something that's going to be around 10 years? Like, I just don't know what to do. And if I'm building, I don't really want to have to go and redo in 5 years. So how do you decide on stuff like that?
One thing is to try to really familiarize yourself with what's going on in design, not because it matters, because at the end of the day, if you like it, that's what is good for you. But at the same time, you don't want to do something and then, a year later, you realize, oh, trends were already changing and I already missed it. There's a lot of online design accounts that you can follow that are great. I always like Architectural Digest, always kind of, shows me things that I'm like, oh, I don't think I like that. But then I'm like, wait, maybe I do like that. It kind of like, kind of shows you what's coming ahead. But that being said, social media, I think, is really wreaking havoc in the design world right now because it's making things change so quickly. And it's honestly been a conversation amongst a lot of designers that it's a struggle because, it's not just a matter, like I've never been a huge like trend follower necessarily, but even inspirations are changing just because of the sheer amount of images that you're seeing day in and day out. If you're kind of in that world and going down those roads of looking at different design accounts and stuff, and it's right there at your fingertips. And so the problem with that is it's just changing way faster than it would in years ago, where it would take years for certain, trends or inspirations to trickle down to, what you're picking at Lowe's. That would be like a 15-year sometimes process that now it's, every 2 years, all the colors are changing, 1 minute gold's in, next minute it's out. By the time you're getting white cabinets, those are out. I know that like trends, even at the beginning of a build, are going to be completely different by the time I move in. And so it's just becoming more and more important to really just focus on what is right for you, what is right for your space, for the environment that you live in, the type of architecture your house has. Do what's right, not necessarily letting yourself, get swayed by all these like moving trends. And I've even made the decision that once I finalize everything, I am completely taking a break from all of that, just so that I can really be excited about my choices by the time I actually live in the house, because it's going to be so long from now that by the time you do it, you've seen it so much already online,
Well, and they always say, like, if you've seen it in Target or Lowe's or something like that, it's already out.
It's done. Yeah.
The thing is like, and this isn't, I guess you might not do this in a custom build, but say my kitchen faucet dies after 10 years. Well, I need a new faucet like tomorrow. Like I can't research. So I'm probably going to go to Lowe's and look at all the choices, and I'm probably going to pick one. And so does that mean I'm automatically definitely going to be out the second I buy it?
No, it doesn't. And I mean, personally, I do pick what I like. I don't care if something is supposedly out. If it's what I know is right, I'm going to do it and I'm going to own it. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's more just knowing yourself, and you yourself might be excited about trends. And so that's where it's hard, because you really got to keep yourself reined in and be like, okay, you can't redo your house every 2 years, And of course, like, everybody says this, it's probably not new news, but I mean, to really try and have the more permanent installations be a little more timeless or versatile or transitional. And then you can always throw new hardware on something or get new pillows or do some easy fixes to upgrade, update stuff.
Right.
Yeah. If you see what's coming down the pike for design, it will blow y'all's mind.
Like, what are some hints?
Well, let's talk some floral balloon balances.
No, like this is all like early in my marriage, what was popular.
Yes. We're talking Laura Ashley bedroom, the whole canopy, the whole thing, matching comforter with the wallpaper, with the curtains, carpet is coming back. Oh, yes.
Well, okay. So when you said like wood cabinets are coming back, I just don't think I can go back. Like, do people ever reach an age where even though they know that might be popular, like you just can't do it again? Like if perms came back, I just still can never do perms again. Like
it's so true. I remember like our parents, when I like bell bottoms and flare jeans were in style when I was in college. And I remember the older people saying, I can never go back to that,
Right.
Yeah.
And I used to just scoff at them, but now I kind of get it. One of my professors in design school, she was this really chic older woman. And I remember at the time, this was in the early 90s, she had a mid-century home that had all concrete floors and all of this modern, sleek minimalism, right? Which at the time was not popular at all, but it was what she liked. And I always remembered that. I always was like, I love how she owns it and like is like, this is just what I am and this is just good design and I don't really care what's going on. And so I thought about that with all the trends coming up. I agree, Marie. There are things that I just cannot go back to. And one of them is carpet. I can't do it. I cannot go back to carpet.
Yeah.
So I will get the biggest area rug I can possibly find.
Right.
But there will not be carpet in my home. I don't care if I die not in style. Like that's just how it's going to be.
Yes, that is how I feel about some things. Like, or I understand wallpaper is a trend and I like to look at it, but I have stripped a lot of wallpaper in my life. And it's just really hard for me to think about installing and going back to wallpaper because after you have stripped it, you never think of wallpaper the same.
No, you really don't. And now with things changing so quickly, just don't do it and it'll be out. It'll be out before it's in. So,
That's true.
But yeah, there's just certain things. And maximalism is definitely coming back. Super traditional architecture and things like that. And that's just never going to be me. And so, I'm always going to be a minimalist. It's just, I'm too old to change on that one. So,
and you're not that old.
Yeah. Well,
out there.
I'm old enough, Mindy.
Yeah. Well, this is great for midlife people to hear because I think we do think Maybe you just reach an age where you're more comfortable with being less cutting edge or something, because some of the things that they're bringing back, you just feel like, no, I just can't go there again. I just can't.
Exactly.
It came back too fast.
That's right.
Do you feel like this is a lifetime home? I mean, I know you've moved a lot. So like, do you plan it as a lifetime home, or do you just look at it like it's 10-year home?
That one is tricky. A lot of people have asked us that. A lot of people assume this was our dream home, which is just not the case. As much as I feel really grateful to have this opportunity, don't get me wrong. It's not like something that we had always sat back and been like, someday we're going to do this, So it just kind of took me by surprise a little bit. I think having my mom there makes it feel more long-term for us, because it is a long-term solution for taking care of my mom, even though when she listens to this, she's not going to like the idea of even talking about her needing to be taken care of. And if you meet her today, you will see she definitely does not need to be taken care of right now. But I do think because of that, I'm thinking about it long term. I kind of hope that's the case. I love the idea of really settling in, especially, which this is going to shock you, Mindy, especially when it comes to the yard. I'm kind of getting inspired by like some yard work. Now, I don't know how much yard work I'm going to be doing versus how much I'm just going to be telling Dwayne, this is what I want.
These are my ideas. Make it come to life.
Yes. But I am excited about just having property with no HOA rules.
Yes, so I can't imagine.
I've always loved bougainvillea, but in an HOA situation, it can take over your neighbor's fence very quickly. So I have these areas where I can just grow, and like I want to do a garden and just things that like, I don't know. It has me hoping that we are here for a long time. And I say hoping just because I've lived too long to know that you just don't know, who knows? So we're kind of planning as if it's long term, but holding that loosely, knowing that who knows, So
I hear you on that. Every time people are like, so how long are you going to live here? I'm like, well, I'd like to say forever, but I've lived too long to I know that the Lord is only in charge of, my future. So who knows?
Yeah. I feel like I'm afraid to say those things. I'm afraid to say a declarative statement like that, because then I feel like he's just up there like, oh, really?
You're going to eat your words.
Remember that podcast you were on?
Yeah.
You said earlier that this is now your 5th house that you're building, but actually your first custom build, which sounds completely different than all the other times. When Bryce and I were newlyweds, I used to listen to James Dobson on the radio, like forever ago. And I remember there was this one particular afternoon, he was talking about couples building homes together. And he said, you should be married at least 10 years before you embark on a build together, because some marriages are not going to make it. It's very difficult to make all of those decisions, design plans, all the things you've just talked about. How are you and Dwayne handling this particular situation?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the difference between a tract home build and a custom home build. So tract home builds are fabulous. They're just lovely experiences most of the time. We have built 4 of them, and it is just, here's your 6 floor plans, and come to the design center one day. Literally, it's like a 6-hour appointment, and you have all your decisions made in 6 hours, and it is fabulous. And I think it's really fun, but obviously your choices are much more limiting and that sort of thing. So there are drawbacks to it, but definitely don't discount it. In fact, they offer a lot of incentives in those neighborhoods. Builder incentives are really great. So it can be a really affordable way to build a new home. And in many cases, it's actually cheaper than buying some sort of fixer upper or something like that. So definitely don't discount building. First of all, I'm a huge fan. But that being said, custom build is very, very different. It is stressful for sure. I think the biggest stress about it is really just the unknowns, and really the financial unknowns is really the big stress. So I could see how doing that in the earlier parts of your marriage, or when you're trying to raise kids with a lot of different unknowns for their for your finances in general, I guess I should say, I could see where it would be very, very stressful. Dwayne and I, thankfully, have been married 23 years. We've lived in a lot of homes. We've done a few complete renos, gut jobs. We've kind of been in stressful or even more stressful situations than this. So for us, it hasn't been too bad. We kind of are on the same page about a lot of things. So that's helped, but just in general, it is stressful. I mean, we managed to find the highest point in all of Florida. I feel like we are on the one hill in Central Florida. Like we are literally, from the bottom of our property to the back, there is 100-foot difference in elevation. Like it's crazy. So we have to have a retaining wall put in behind our pool, and it's not something we didn't know from the front end, but like, how much is the retaining wall going to be still in the, how far does the well need to go? They're not going to know till they start digging. There's things that are just unknowns. And so that's, I think, where the stress can really, rub, especially if you're not on the same page about things. And then I think a big thing is to make sure you're on the same page about what you want before you sign a contract. So I'm talking finishes. I told them up front, I want marble and granite. Have some things that before you get that bid and before you sign a contract, you want to say, I want these types of go ahead and look at all the different things and you kind of know before you talk to them to be sure. If you want, 3/4 inch solid wood floors throughout your whole house, that's going to be quite an expense. And that needs to be considered in the bid. And sometimes your contractor is not going to be very good at really nailing you down on some things like that. There's some things that I really like that I wish I could have, but they're negotiable, or it's maybe something I could do later. Whereas there were some things that are really important. And if I'm going to build a home, this is how it's going to be. Well, you need to know that, for us, the pool is non-negotiable. I will stay in my little apartment before I will move to a house without a pool. So, pool builds, when we built a pool the last time, were around 25 to 35,000 starting, which at the time was so much because they were even less before that. Those same exact pools are now $75, $90, $100,000. So, you need to know these things going in between your spouse, make sure you're on the same page about what your non-negotiables are and really get as much of a clear picture of the finances. And then just add, I think they say add 30%. I think that's probably a good rule of thumb. You just basically hedge your bet under by like 30%, knowing that you're going to have overages and things that you cannot control. And, some of it you don't think about. It's like, do I want sound insulation everywhere? Okay, yeah, I do. Well, then that's an addition. There's things that are like, you do it now because you're building and you end up, you just kind of end up, even if you don't have really expensive taste, there's things that add up pretty quickly. I think the finances are really where the stress comes between the partners. And like I said, it is a stressful time for us, but I feel like we're in it together. I don't feel like so far we've had a lot of conflict, but I could see how that could easily definitely take place for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And also too, I will say the only kind of harder thing is like I live, sleep, eat, breathe this right now. And that's how I am when I'm in a project. I'm like all in. And he is definitely not like that, number one. And number two, specifically with design, when I ask him, which color do you like? He's trying to read my eyes to see what color does she want me to say.
What does she want me to say?
He really doesn't care at all. And especially if I don't show him the price difference between two different things, then he really has zero opinion. And so, I have to be careful not to overwhelm him and just have this constant drip of like, this is a long process. He can't be doing this all day. And that's all we talk about. And I've sometimes been bad about bringing something up at 11:45 at night. And he's just like, I just want to go to bed. Like, I don't want to talk about this right now. So in that case, I think it's, maybe find some friends that are willing to go the mile with you a little bit, that are interested. We all have our mutual friend, Leslie Cook, who is a designer and super talented. And I'm going to owe her something big after this project is over because she's been so helpful. But just to have a sounding board that's not your spouse may be a good idea. But sometimes it's the husband that's more into it than the wife. It's not necessarily.
Well, and are you having to consider your mom? Are you designing your mom's or is she designing her own? Because that's a whole other house. Basically, you're doing two houses.
It is, yes. But, my artistic brain can't make those separate. So even though when you're in the two different houses, you would never know that they are together. But my goal was to really just have things that could marry in both spaces. But actually, she's pretty hip. And she also is really like, do what you want, So she's only really had a few opinions, but I was really trying to tailor it more. I was trying to kind of marry both of our styles to really tailor it to what she would want. But actually, she's kind of ready for some change and open to whatever. So it's kind of been really easy and awesome. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I mean, this is more than just a custom build for you and your husband. It's also you and your mom. So you've got a lot of interpersonal dynamics going on. It's a good thing that they both kind of trust your opinion, and maybe are giving you kind of the final say.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Well, my mom, the only thing that's funny with my mom is a lot of times she likes the cheaper things. So like genuinely. So that's the thing. There's been things that I'm like, I have already slated a gas stove for her or a nice new French door freezer on the bottom fridge or whatever. And she's like, oh no, I hate those. I just want the old cheap, the old side by side, or I just want an electric range. So that's the thing. I have to be careful to make sure I run by her some of the things that like, she's actually way more low maintenance about. So, or she prefer, like we had a glass enclosure for her one tub and she would rather have a shower curtain, things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but I'm going to make it cute. She's going to be super hip grandma. So.
Oh, I just cannot wait to see this. Yes. About how long is this process? Like you said, you started it about a year ago. When do you envision that you will be in?
Well, I keep calling it our imaginary home, if that gives you any clue, because it doesn't feel like it's ever going to happen. Right now, we have only staked the house out on the property. And the slab has not gone in yet, but they are saying hopefully a year from now. That's like best case scenario would be a year from now. However, we have been in this process for a year and a half. Almost a year and a half. But I will say a huge part of that up front was me designing my own house and my own floor plan. Like I said, you could probably shave off a huge chunk of that. And I would say for 99.99999% of people, there is a floor plan out there for you. I do think that is true. I just think like with my mom and her needs, like I said, a lot of the in-law suites are just super tiny little like kitchenette, type situation. Or this is another pet peeve of mine. A lot of times there'll be a lot more like with the square footage would be like a lot more square footage, but only one living area. Like I had some things that just was bothering me, but regardless, had I not had my mom, I probably would have made myself find something that I was happy with, and there's a lot out there, but for example, you will spend at least $10,000 just hiring an architect to do this for you, even though I'm a designer or I have a background in design, not a designer currently. Even if I was licensed and up to date as a designer, I would not be able to draw my own plans without a stamp of approval from an architect anyways. So regardless of what you do, if you don't pick a plan that's already been stamped, you're going to have to pay an architect to do that. The plans, you can buy plans online for $1,800, something like that. Or better, your builder has tons of plans. Any house they've ever built, they have a plan for, and then some, so that will definitely shave off a huge chunk of time because you can't even get a quote for a house until the plans are done. I mean, at least the black line drawings are done. And so then at that point, you're going to get a quote. Then after that, you're going to figure out your financing, which I do recommend going ahead and making sure your home is sold. I know that's like controversial for a lot of people, but don't start this process until you sell your, like, go ahead and commit and sell your home and know how much money you're working with. Because I don't know if we have seen anything in the past 2 years, the market is nuts.
Right.
It is crazy and really up and down. So, yeah, I definitely recommend go ahead and sell your home. Just count on doing temporary housing. When you're building, you're going to have to do it anyway. So you're going to be in there for a while unless you just have expendable income where you can go ahead and pay for the process without rolling your mortgage into it or whatever. So yeah. So then after you get your quote from your builder or multiple builders, then you're going to secure your financing, figure out how you want to do it and all of that. And then you're going to sign a contract. And then that's when the process started. So like you're in permitting after that. And so we have been in permitting for, oh my word, a year, almost a year. So we did get it a few weeks, 2 months ago, I think we finally got our permit. So it's depending on the county you're in, which our county, 5 miles down the road is a totally different process. And one takes really long and one doesn't take so long. So that's something that you can't really prepare for. You just have to sit and wait.
No bribes that you can do.
No bribes. No bribes. Yeah. Yeah, no. And then you go to do the pool permits. The turnaround for those are like 3 days. I'm like, okay.
Well, that's
why can't
good.
the other be like that? Yeah.
Okay.
But we are in an area of the country that is booming, and so I think we're in the top. I think we're in the top 5 places people are moving, and then Tampa is the number 1 place in Florida that people are moving.
Wow.
So I do think some of it is they're just really behind, and a lot of people started building or wanting to do a build after COVID. A lot of people are moving out. So yeah. So it could be that it starts to slow down. I don't know, but ours is taking forever.
Oh my goodness.
So I feel like in midlife, this actually isn't as stressful as a process, just because of the timing of things. Temporary housing is kind of fantastic. We are thoroughly enjoying living in an apartment. It feels like we're on vacation. Of course, we do live in Florida, so we have a fabulous pool and all of that in the apartment. We were going to get a house, but I'm so glad we didn't because, I don't know, even with a house you're renting, you might feel like, oh, they haven't mowed the lawn or this needs to be fixed or, that kind of thing. Whereas in the apartment, it just truly feels like we're, I don't know, staying in a condo or something like that. And so it's really great when you have an issue to just call the office and be like, sorry, I need this light bulb change, or whatever.
Yes. My toilet's running. Can you?
Yeah. So it's kind of great. And honestly, I think that it would be different if we had kids, kids were trying to get off to school and all the normal lives. We can kind of take this time and it just be a different stage for us and enjoy it. And we're not in a huge rush or anything. I think that if we had a bunch of kids stuck in this little, it's not a super tiny apartment, but still,
right.
We would be on top of each other and I'd probably be so annoyed that it's taking so long, but thankfully we're not really. I think my mom is probably more anxious than we are.
Okay.
She just really loves hosting and things like that. She doesn't like to be unsettled, but we're just kind of enjoying it. And, we really tried to not unpack a lot of things, and so we're living minimally. I know, Mindy, you've probably had lots of temporary situations like that. So
we've had the one major temporary situation and we loved it. For the time that we were there, like I was saying, had we not had 3 boys in our townhome, Bryce and I could have handled it for a while. So we really, I remember getting so excited to clean because I'm like, 5 minutes, I'm done.
No, literally, I'll just sit there and be like, oh, I've got to clean. I need to clean up. And it's hanging over my head. And then I go to do it and it's 30 minutes and the whole apartment is clean.
Whole thing's done.
Yeah.
It's really kind of great. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I really do feel like the going into the empty nest gives you a freedom to try something like that without the stress of little kids and, just all the things that come along with that. It is a good time to try it. And it sounds like it's going really, really well. So.
Yeah, I would say there is one thing that has been a little bit of a hurdle, and this I feel like kind of marries into midlife also, is that I'm realizing with this type of build, you sometimes can feel like you're bugging the builder or you're kind of being annoying or particular or whatever. And I've realized like you 100% have to be assertive and kind of be the driving force. Like my husband and I both are realizing like we have to be the driving force, and that's uncomfortable for me, but I think it's something I'm trying to like step into a little more in this stage of life. I think it's maybe a little easier than it would have been in other stages where I'm kind of like, okay, I just have to put my head down and know that they might be rolling their eyes at the moment or whatever. And it's okay. It's just, but it's a lot of money, and you know, you kind of have to just be on top of it and make sure that it's kind of going the way it needs to go. And that's sometimes uncomfortable for me. But I think that in this stage of life, it's maybe a little easier than it would have been in my early 20s or something like that. So.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. You've learned that if you don't speak up, you may live to regret it.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, thank you, Tiana. This is so eye-opening. I think that there's probably people listening that have fantasized about building a new house, or even just, these are good things that you can take even into a remodel. Like if you're remodeling, you still have to go through a lot of choices, and you still have to shop it, and you still have to look at your budget and say, hey, where am I going to put the money? The biggest areas and then the smaller areas. I mean, all of this stuff, how am I going to decide what's going to stand the test of time and not? So just appreciate you getting on and sharing these tips, because I know I could just talk about this kind of stuff all day.
Yes.
Well, and I do think that I would be remiss to say that really you should consider hiring a professional to help you in this process.
True.
You know, I think that it can be a very expensive thing, but there are different levels of help when you work with a designer. And make sure that you're getting someone that is a licensed designer or interior architect. Don't go with someone who is a decorator or just calls themselves a designer, because they're not going to have the knowledge of the inner workings of floor plans and construction and things like that. And also you want to work with a licensed architect. Even you don't want to just get a stamp of approval. You want someone who artistically is going to know how your floor plan translates to a real house. Like that's something that I'm not good at. And so I knew I needed someone who can visualize, okay, well, the pitch of the roof or how this part of the roof marries another part of the roof. Like that's all very overwhelming. And so you can kind of tell when you're driving around seeing houses, but you're like, okay, I think they did that on their own and didn't really seek the right help. So you don't want to be in that situation. But even just a lower level of design help could be really helpful, even if it's just a little bit of consulting to kind of help you. Like you said, if you're one of those that gets overwhelmed with cabinet choices or even just some of the basic things, you could always reach out and get some professional help. So.
And I think that's one of the nice things about track homes is I think a lot of times they will provide a consult with the designer and she'll kind of guide you a little bit. And that probably makes people feel more confident.
Yes. And especially too, when you're dealing with budgets, you know, I think that, when you have the track home, it's so nice because it's kind of already set and it's very clear what the upgrade costs are going to be. But a designer and a custom bill will help you see to the future and not let you spend a huge portion of your budget on countertops at the very beginning when they know you're going to want A, B, or C at the end. You know?
Okay.
So.
Right. That's such good advice, Tiana. I think in this world of do-it-yourself, we get caught up in thinking, oh, I can look at a few shots on Instagram, or I should be able to do this myself. And it's not as easy as it looks on TV.
No. Even with someone with a background in design, I've said multiple times, I wish I could have hired a designer to help me with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a partner in crime.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing. Okay. So now we've had you on 3 times. I feel like there's probably other things that we can pick your brain about. So listeners, this will not be the last time you hear from Tiana, but if you have any comments or things you want to ask, or you just want to tell us about your home building experience, you can come and find us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast, or you can email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. But Tiana, we have loved having you on today. We know that we'll have you back, and we cannot wait to see pictures. It might be a year, it might be, 18 months, but eventually this imaginary house will become a reality.
Someday. Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Yes, I already want to plan to have you back at the end and after you've moved in to kind of recap, how this all went. And so I would love to hear from you at that point again. So for sure.
All right.
That would be awesome.
Okay. Well, we'll talk with you guys again later.
All right.
Sounds great.
Okay. Bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.